Subscribe right now because this story exposes a shocking gap between what Canadian intelligence agencies knew about foreign interference and when the Prime Minister's office was actually informed. Hit that notification bell because what we're uncovering today has triggered a massive government inquiry that just released its final report. Comment below if you think government leaders should be fully briefed on threats to our democracy. This isn't just about intelligence reports gathering dust in filing cabinets. It's about the timeline controversy that's dividing Ottawa and raising questions about whether Canadian democracy was adequately protected. Watch until the end because the unanswered questions revealed in Justice Marie-Josée Hogue's inquiry will shake your confidence in how this country handles national security. Deep inside classified Canadian intelligence files, something was quietly uncovered in 2022 and early 2023 that would eventually ignite one of the biggest political controversies in recent memory. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Canada's primary spy agency, had gathered evidence of sophisticated Chinese interference in the 2019 and 2021 federal elections, and the revelations left senior government officials scrambling to explain why certain information didn't reach those who needed to know it most. When media reports about Csis documents began surfacing in late 2022, citing unnamed security sources and classified intelligence, the federal government found itself under intense scrutiny. The Prime Minister's office claimed it hadn't received crucial briefing materials, while Csis maintained it had shared the intelligence through proper channels. This fundamental disagreement sparked Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to launch a public inquiry into foreign interference, appointing Justice Marie-Josée Hogue as commissioner. What followed was a 16-month investigation that heard testimony from over 150 witnesses, examined mountains of classified documents, and ultimately revealed something deeply troubling about how Canadian government agencies communicate with each other during national security crises. The core issue revolved around intelligence that Csis believed showed China had clandestinely and deceptively meddled in both elections, primarily working to re-elect the Liberal government as a minority and to target certain conservative candidates viewed as unfriendly to Beijing. According to court documents and public testimony, Csis submitted detailed reports about this interference through formal briefing channels, but questions emerged about whether senior political leaders actually received the most critical information in a timely manner.
The hidden intelligence. What Csis discovered in the shadows.
Throughout 2022, Csis intelligence analysts working in secure facilities across Canada were accumulating evidence of Chinese interference operations that extended far beyond typical diplomatic channels. The reports they compiled showed that Beijing viewed Canada as what they called a high-priority target for foreign meddling, primarily because Canada is a member of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing alliance alongside the United States, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. Chinese interference activities included clandestine campaign donations, attempts to influence specific nomination contests within political parties, systematic harassment of diaspora communities, and coordinated disinformation campaigns designed to shape electoral outcomes. One particularly troubling case involved Michael Cheung, a conservative member of parliament who had spearheaded a parliamentary motion declaring China's treatment of Uyghurs to constitute genocide. Csis intelligence suggested that Cheung and his family members in Hong Kong had been targeted by a Chinese diplomat named Zhao Wei, apparently as leverage to influence Cheung's political positions and voting behavior. This represented state-level targeting of a Canadian elected official in his home country, yet there were serious questions about whether Cheung received adequate warning about the threat posed to his relatives abroad. Another controversial incident involved Han Dong, a Toronto area member of parliament representing Don Valley North, whose Liberal nomination contest in 2019 appeared to have been the target of foreign interference. Csis believed irregularities in that contest bore the hallmarks of Chinese activity, though officials debated whether the agency had provided sufficient evidence to justify removing Dong as a candidate. The disagreement between Csis and political leadership over what constituted adequate proof of interference highlighted fundamental tensions about how to handle intelligence that suggested wrongdoing by elected officials. Csis also documented evidence that Pakistan had attempted to clandestinely influence Canadian federal politics before the 2019 election, and that India had allegedly provided secret financial support to candidates from multiple political parties. These revelations painted a picture of foreign states actively working to penetrate Canadian democracy at multiple levels, targeting vulnerable nomination contests, vulnerable candidates susceptible to influence, and diaspora communities through intimidation and harassment campaigns. The intelligence gathering continued throughout 2022 and into early 2023 as analysts assembled what they believed was irrefutable evidence of systematic foreign interference. The timeline controversy. When intelligence becomes knowledge. The critical question that would dominate months of inquiry testimony involved establishing exactly when the Prime Minister's office knew about Csis's findings. According to Justice Hogue's investigation, Csis prepared a highly sensitive and comprehensive intelligence assessment in February 2023 specifically for briefing the Prime Minister. This document warned that China's interference was pragmatic in nature and focused primarily on supporting candidates viewed as either pro-China or neutral on Beijing's core interests. The briefing note explicitly stated that protecting Canadian democratic institutions would require a fundamental shift in government perspective and willingness to take decisive action with consequences for perpetrators. However, when Deputy Chief of Staff Brian Clow testified before the inquiry, he claimed that most of the critical information contained in that February 2023 briefing document was never actually shared during the meeting with Csis officials. Clow stated that crucial context and specific warnings about the scope of Chinese interference didn't reach the inner circle of decision-makers who might have acted on it. This raised alarming questions about whether filters within the government apparatus were preventing sensitive information from reaching those who needed to make critical decisions about national security. Prime Minister Trudeau himself testified that he had not received briefings about China's alleged preference for a liberal minority government in the 2021 election, which seemed to contradict Csis statements about the information they believed they had conveyed. During his testimony, Trudeau emphasized that the only way to guarantee he receives critical information is through in-person briefing or secure line conversations, suggesting that written briefing notes were insufficient for issues of such magnitude. This created an unusual situation where intelligence agencies believed they had properly shared critical information through formal channels, while political leaders claimed they hadn't received what they considered adequate briefing. Justice Hogue's final report identified 6 instances of suspected foreign interference, some of which had never been passed on to Prime Minister Trudeau at all. These included reports of Pakistan attempting to influence Canadian federal politics and India allegedly providing financial support to candidates from multiple parties. The fact that major intelligence about foreign interference in elections reached some government officials but not the Prime Minister himself suggested serious structural failures in how information flows through government during national security crises. The timeline revealed by the inquiry showed that some Csis warnings came in October 2022, others in February 2023, and yet critical briefing materials only reached certain government officials while bypassing others entirely.
The communication breakdown. Information lost in government as a labyrinth.
The inquiry discovered that Canada's government structure for handling foreign interference intelligence involved multiple layers of bureaucracy that sometimes prevented information from reaching decision-makers. The panel of 5 included the Clerk of the Privy Council, the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, and deputy heads from Justice, Public Safety, and Foreign Affairs. This group received regular briefings from Csis through formal channels, and they were supposed to serve as information gatekeepers to senior political leadership. However, the inquiry found that this system often failed to transmit urgent intelligence to the Prime Minister and his most senior advisors. Justice Hogue's investigation revealed that in February 2023, senior government officials agreed that a highly sensitive and comprehensive intelligence assessment on foreign interference needed to be briefed to the Prime Minister. Yet the National Security and Intelligence Advisor later concluded that the activities in question did not constitute foreign interference and chose not to share the assessment with Trudeau at all. This decision by a single official essentially filtered out critical information that arguably should have reached the highest levels of government without interpretation or gatekeeping. The implications were staggering. Elected leaders were making decisions about national security without access to classified intelligence that their own intelligence agencies considered essential. Csis Director David Vigneault testified that he believed he had adequately informed the Prime Minister's office about Chinese interference, but this conflicted with testimony from PMO officials who said they had not been fully briefed. During his testimony, Vigneault described intelligence work as being like a puzzle, where sometimes analysts have a clear picture and sometimes they're still assembling pieces. He defended his agency's professional work while acknowledging that communication about sensitive intelligence had proven problematic. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre seized on testimony suggesting Trudeau didn't read briefing notes, stating that the Prime Minister's defense speaks for itself, when his excuse for not acting on foreign interference threats was that he doesn't read detailed briefing materials. The communication breakdown extended to political parties themselves. During the 2021 federal election, Csis attempted to brief security-cleared representatives from political parties about foreign interference threats. However, the investigation found that information intended for party leaders often stopped with party operatives who didn't have direct access to those leaders. Conservative Party representatives claimed they never received adequate briefings about China's alleged interference campaign, while Liberal representatives argued they weren't informed about specific threats to their nomination contests or to party members. This fragmented communication system meant that while intelligence existed within government, the people who needed to act on it often remained in the dark. Justice Hogue concluded in her final report released January 28, 2025, that the government has been overall a poor communicator when it comes to foreign interference in Canada. She criticized the fact that most Canadians first learned about foreign interference through media investigative reports rather than from their own government. The government faced particular criticism for allowing classified intelligence about foreign meddling to leak to journalists and be published before providing official information to opposition leaders and the public. This inverted process damaged credibility and suggested serious mismanagement of sensitive national security information throughout the government apparatus. The unanswered questions: what Hogue discovered and what must change? Justice Hogue's inquiry identified critical gaps in how Canada's government detects, deters, and counters foreign interference attempts. Her final report, delivered in January 2025 and comprising 7 volumes of detailed analysis and evidence, presented 51 specific recommendations for improving the government's response to foreign meddling. Approximately half of these recommendations, Hogue stated, could be implemented promptly, perhaps even before the next election, indicating the urgency she places on these institutional reforms. However, significant questions remain about whether the government will actually implement these changes or merely file the report alongside numerous previous intelligence reviews. One major finding was that while foreign interference by various states did not alter which party formed government in the 2019 and 2021 elections, foreign meddling may have affected results in a small number of ridings, and represented what Hogue called a stain on our electoral process. She described interference activities from China, India, Russia, and other nations as ranging from campaign interference and illegal donations to targeted harassment of diaspora communities and disinformation campaigns. Yet she also emphasized that the extent to which foreign interference has succeeded in permeating our democratic processes and institutions should not be overblown, cautioning against overreaction even as she documented systematic foreign meddling. A particularly controversial finding involved Csis allegations against some parliamentarians being described in intelligence reports as either semi-witting or witting participants in foreign interference schemes. When a separate intelligence watchdog, the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, reported allegations that some federal politicians had accepted funds from foreign governments, leaked classified information, or provided privileged information to foreign diplomats about fellow parliamentarians, the inquiry heard explosive testimony. However, Justice Hogue ultimately concluded that while some parliamentarians showed troubling and concerning conduct in dealings with foreign powers, their actions did not amount to treason, and there was no evidence of elected officials deliberately conspiring with hostile states. This finding troubled many observers who expected stronger accusations. Hogue acknowledged that there is no cause for widespread alarm about parliamentarians being compromised, yet her investigation did recommend that all federal political party leaders be encouraged to obtain top-secret security clearance to receive proper briefings on threats to their parties and members. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has refused to seek this clearance, arguing it would prevent him from speaking openly and challenging the Liberal government. This impasse highlights ongoing tensions between the need for elected officials to understand national security threats and their desire to maintain complete freedom of political speech. Hogue's recommendations include establishing a new government agency specifically dedicated to monitoring and countering misinformation and disinformation campaigns, improving how intelligence flows between agencies and political leadership, updating the Canada Elections Act with stronger protections, and creating a declassification system to release information about foreign interference, where it is in the public interest and where it would not unduly prejudice national security. She specifically recommended that intelligence agencies better warn individual politicians and candidates who are targets of foreign interference, noting that Conservative MP Michael Chung should have been informed that Csis believed he and his relatives in Hong Kong were being targeted by Chinese government measures intended to gain leverage over him. The government responded to Hogue's final report by announcing $77 million in funding for more effective election investigations, stronger measures to counter online disinformation, and better systems for tracking possible foreign interference. However, critics argue these steps are inadequate compared to the scale of the threat documented in the inquiry. Media outlets that broke the original stories about Chinese interference, particularly the Globe and Mail, which published investigations based on classified intelligence, are now being recognized as having played a crucial role in forcing transparency that government itself failed to provide. Justice Hogue specifically noted that investigative journalism exposed the extent of foreign interference in Canadian electoral and domestic affairs in a way that government communication systems had not. What remains unclear is whether these recommendations will be implemented before the next federal election, which could occur within months of the report's release. Hogue stated that some measures can and should be implemented immediately, suggesting urgency. Yet government bureaucracies typically move slowly, and implementing major institutional changes requires parliamentary action, budget allocations, and coordination across multiple agencies that have not historically worked together seamlessly. The fundamental question underlying all of this remains unanswered. Will Canada learn from the foreign interference that penetrated its electoral processes in 2019 and 2021, or will similar vulnerabilities persist into future elections? The inquiry's work has exposed a Canadian national security system that operates in compartments, where different agencies possess different pieces of crucial intelligence, where bureaucratic gatekeepers can filter information away from elected leaders, and where communication between security agencies and political decision-makers remains fragmented and often inadequate. Justice Hogue's report demonstrates that the government was indeed aware of foreign interference threats, but that awareness was distributed unevenly, action was delayed, and some critical warnings never reached those in positions to respond. As Canada moves toward its next federal election, these questions about institutional capacity and government preparedness for foreign meddling will only grow more urgent and more controversial. Don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications so you stay updated as this story develops.